Thanks, listeners, for joining us for today's Elko Live here on KELK. This is National Cowboy Poetry Gathering Week. And so every day this week, we're dedicating some time, of course, to this annual event now that is 39 years young and going strong. We're hearing all good indications about the future. And our guests today are in for our regular city program. We wanted to mention that Elko City Manager Jan Baum said, hey, we're in between meetings. Cowboy Poetry is so important to this community. We want to give our radio time over to some guests who will talk about Western folk life, the impacts to the community, and where we might be going. So, perfect guest today. We have John Patrick Rice, who is retired from the City Council and wears many hats. He is on the Western Folk Life Center Board of Directors. He's actually a trustee, secretary of the organization. We have Cyd McMullen, who's part of the National Advisory Council for the Western Folk Life Center, and Cyd is retired from Great Basin College, much beloved as an English professor, Cyd, and we will get the history and we'll get a glimpse of what might be on the horizon for the National Gathering and the Western Folk Life Center here on today's program. So welcome, Cyd. It's great to see you again.
Thank you, Lori.
It's
great to be here.
Yeah, it was just about a year ago when you were on the program last, right?
Just about.
We were promoting your book, High Desert Empire, The Story of Ellison Ranching Company.
Yes, Jan Peterson and I took 10 years of our lives to put that together, and it is published, beautifully published, and it is now out and available for purchase at the Western Folk Life Center, at the museum, the Northeastern Nevada Museum, and at the Cowboy Arts and Gear Museum. And in fact, we're having a signing on Friday from 3 to 4. If you have a copy and you'd like us to sign it, we'd be glad to do so.
Yeah, those copies flew off the shelves. It's good to know you had another printing or some available.
Oh, yes, we have some available.
That's fantastic. It is a beautiful book. It's in this coffee table style because I say that it's beautifully bound, Cyd, and it has extraordinary historical photographs. And even though the title is The Story of Ellison Ranching Company, it's really a story of ranching and the cattle industry of 100 years or so from this region.
Absolutely. I have deep ranching roots in this area myself, and what I learned my own family story from writing this book, although my family was in Star Valley instead of in the North Country. But it was quite an experience, and it taught me a lot about my own family struggles through the Great Depression and the settling of this area. And so it's more than Ellison Ranching Company. It's actually a story. We tried to put it in the context of ranching in Elko County and in northeastern Nevada. And so it's been pretty popular. People seem to really love it. And I have to put a thank you out there to the Ellison Ranching Company because they didn't stint when it came to putting the book together and printing it. It is really a beautiful book.
Mm-hmm. It is a collector's book. Certainly will be one that will be on the bookshelves and shared, hopefully, for generations to come. And speaking of generations, I mean, that's really what we're looking at now with the National Cowboy Poetry Gathering. And Cyd, when we come back, we'll visit with you about the origins of the gathering, because it's fair to say that both you and I were pretty much there when all of this fun got started. So
yes, we were.
Yes, definitely. And he came in at about the midway point, I'd have to say. John Rice from the Western Folk Life Center Board of Trustees now, Great Basin College Theater Director. Welcome to the radio show, John.
Thanks. Happy to be here, and thanks a bunch. Yeah, and it's interesting what, just the preview we've had about Cyd and Jan's book. It's really about full circle, and wonderful that Cyd was able, in the research of that book, find out more things about her own family. That's really a full circle sort of story as well, and that's really what this year's Cowboy Poetry Gathering is about. Its theme is Right Where We Belong, which is really right here in Elko. And so many things about this gathering and future gatherings are about celebrating the landscape we live in, the way we make our living on this landscape, primarily in the ranching industry, but it's very much about being in in this place and in this time. And I think, Cyd and I talked a little bit about it earlier, but what Cyd will talk about in the origins of the gathering was the role that Charles Greenhaw had in this, who was at the time the president of Great Basin College, and he encouraged the formation of this of the organization and the event, made sure a lot of things were able to happen, and offered the college's support in a variety of ways while it was a fledgling organization. And this year, Charles Greenhaw's granddaughter, Callie Greenhaw, has come back and is serving as the program director. I can't think of the title exactly.
Cowboy Poetry Manager.
Yeah, she's the manager of the Cowboy Poetry Gathering itself. So it's wonderful that and Callie's work is in folk life and anthropology, I believe, and she's a PhD candidate if she hasn't completed her PhD already, studying, doing the same sort of work that Cyd did previously and did more recently with Jan, helping to preserve this wonderful culture. And I think that the gathering itself this year is really a reflection of the many changes our community has gone through as well. With the consolidation of Newmont and Barrick's operation here with Nevada Gold Mines, it has brought an influx of young professionals into our region who are as interested in the culture of the Great Basin as any of us. And we believe that we've kind of reflected that change in the programming, especially in some of the music, lots of younger performers for this year's gathering, and a whole new look at the future.
John Patrick Rice from, of course, the Western Folklife Center's Board of Directors, where he is serving as trustee. Thank you, John. That's a wonderful, rousing introduction to this topic, as you said, and sort of trying to get the whole picture of what the National Gathering is about. And Cyd, in order to do that, talking more about the history, and I did want to, I was under the impression, just like John, that a lot of people recall that Dr. Greenhaw was president, but was he a dean, right?
He was actually the academic dean. Yeah.
Right,
right.
Okay. But Callie says the same thing. It's like we always thought of him as, because he was really the face and voice, and he did so much for what was then NNCC.
Yes, and he was a visionary. He earlier than almost anyone realized what a folk festival in Elko, Nevada in January would do for Elko County, Elko City and Elko County. Before it was even really, the first year, it was a one-time event as far as we knew. I met with Hal Cannon, whom I had known from graduate school in Utah, along with Sarah Campsey, Sweetwater, and Dr. Greenhaw in about 1983, and Hal proposed, he said, what would you think about a cowboy poetry gathering or event in Elko? And we all thought it was a great idea. Hal was trying to think of something that would represent the West, the larger West, and he had become familiar with a lot of the Western ranching culture in Elko County as the Utah folklorist who had come here for a variety of reasons. And so he thought Elko would be the right place. Elko had an infrastructure like a convention center and the college and things that a lot of small towns in Nevada and elsewhere in the West didn't have in 1980, early 80s. So I was actually one of the first volunteers for the Cowboy Poetry Gathering and the Western Folklife Center, and I went on from there to serve as in a variety of capacities on the board, ran the silent auction for 5 years, was a press liaison. I have had quite a career of volunteer work with Cowboy Poetry Gathering and the Western Folklife Center. I was even the California folklorist for 1 year and did a 3-week trip to California interviewing cowboy poets. But what really inspires me about, and continues to inspire me about this, is that it represents the West in a more real way than many of the representations of the West do. It allows cowboys and ranch people to speak for themselves. And I think that's its value. And it's sad now. Many people say to me, some of the guys that I love to see are gone. The men and women who were young and spry in 1985 at the first gathering are now in empty saddles in the program. And yet we see a whole new generation of singers and poets and songwriters and other people who have benefited from this, who've learned this from the ground up, a lot of them, who came to the first gathering as children and maybe even spoke at their first time at an open session and were discovered there or got the bug there and continued to improve their delivery and their writing skills. And so we really are coming full circle, because so many of these people who were young at the beginning or very young children at the beginning are now actually our performers and our spectators.
And our program managers in some cases, right? As you mentioned, Callie Greenhaw and this whole generation. What amazes me is the confidence that they have. And I know, John, in your role, Great Basin College, you're the theater director and you teach classes. In fact, you helped, both you and Cyd were colleagues at GBC before Cyd retired. And I think there was an intersection of time where, Cyd, as you were outgoing, the college was migrating a lot online. We're seeing a lot of this happening online. A lot of content's being pushed out. It's actually reaching this new generation as well. And they're mastering this technology and performance.
Well, Kristen Windbigler, the executive director of the Western Folklife Center, deserves all the credit for really, taking the next step in terms of media and presentation and outreach in media, online. Her background is in the high-tech industry as well.
And TED Talks.
Yeah, and TED Talks. Right, exactly. So she knows the power of that kind of technology. But looking at TED Talks, those are live presentations with a live audience, which are recorded and then spread out. I use TED Talks substantially in my online learning because it provides such a wonderful diversity of information for our students. But it's the same thing that we're doing with the Cowboy Poetry Gathering. I went down to the Folklife Center last night with our daughter Olivia, who needed to pick up some part of her packet, and there was a drone flying above the parking lot as we arrived, which is part of the coverage. I went and walked through the G3 Bar Theater, and the whole back wall is lined with technology and television and film cameras and everything. All of this for people to enjoy live, sitting shoulder to shoulder, laughing and crying and reacting with one another in these spaces full of humanity. But we're also sending it out to the world in a very effective way. So it's thrilling to watch it happen and to see, when I came here in 1995 or 96, it was 10 years old or maybe 12 years old.
10.
And I was at that first gathering. I remember I couldn't wait for it to occur. It was funny. And Cyd was actually on my tenure committee, so if you want to blame anyone for my longevity here, Cyd's one of the people you can talk with. But
thank you, Cyd. yes. No. Yeah.
But one of the things I remember talking to Cyd about was, first of all, the county fair, which was the very first thing that I experienced when I arrived, and then I was able to look forward to the poetry gathering and looked forward to it immensely until it finally happened. And at that time, I was actually playing the fiddle. And and one of the things I remember was going to the open mics and kind of standing aside and playing my fiddle along until someone said, "Come on, fiddler." I'm like, "Oh, I'm the fiddler." And so it's those kind of opportunities that we're creating I was a young professional, new to town at that time, and it ticked off a bunch of boxes for me in what I desired in the community I lived in. So not only are we making sure that the world knows about the work that we're doing and the fun we're having, but we're reminding the community that we're here and we're ready to move forward. There'll be challenges, no doubt, but I think we have the kind of leadership that's going to help us to make the transitions we need to make.
Our guest today talking about the national 39 years of the National Cowboy Poetry Gathering. It's just amazing just to say it. And talking with John Patrick Rice, Great Basin College, also on the Western Folklife Board of Directors as a trustee, and Cyd McMullen, of course, emeritus from Great Basin College. And I do believe both of you are doctors, right? PhDs. So thank you. I should have given you that earlier. We have this wealth of knowledge and history here. And I wanted to give you a chance. Cyd, you were nodding when John was talking. Was there something you wanted to comment on that he was saying?
Well, the theme this year, Right Where We Belong, resonates for me because in the earlier years there was a lot of threat, quote unquote, from other communities who said, we can give you more money, we can give you more central location, we can pay for this, we can do that. But Right Where We Belong has been Elko for the Cowboy Poetry Gathering. And that hasn't prevented us from spinning off a variety of cowboy poetry gatherings all across the West, so that it's become really a kind of popularization of an old art form for lots of people from variety of different backgrounds. I didn't realize until I got involved with cowboy poetry how many different traditions there are among cowboys in different parts of the West. Florida cowboys can be considered part of the West, Georgia, in their work with cattle and in their agriculture. But every group has a different tradition, and yet somehow Elko, not just the gathering, but Elko itself has been a kind of center. People don't say, well, we're going to the Cowboy Poetry Gathering. People who are in the cowboy community, they say, we're going to Elko.
Yeah.
And what they mean is this place where they feel comfortable, where the community has welcomed them from 1985 with open arms, where probably 350 to 500 Elko people volunteer every single year. And in fact, if you don't, you'll get in trouble with them if you don't offer them a volunteer slot. Some of them, they get angry at you because they have so much fun driving vans or taking tickets or doing a variety of other things that would cost tremendous amount of money. So Elko may not be the wealthiest community that's ever had an interest in the gathering, but it certainly is one of the most welcoming. And I think it's basically put its stamp on the gathering in a way so that Elko is right where this event belongs, this hub of the wheel that has so many spokes going out to different places in the world, in this country, in the West, in the U.S., and in the world.
Cyd reminds me of when I grew up in rural Wisconsin and in a farming community. We didn't live on the farm, but my grandmother managed a couple of farms, and my dad and I would go out to the farm on Saturday mornings to see how things were doing, mostly to make sure our boots smelled like manure. And then we'd go to the cafe afterwards, and all of my dad's friends would complain about how he smelled like the barn. But when I first heard about the National Cowboy Poetry Gathering was when I was working as an actor in New York, and I was in my cool little basement apartment on the Upper West Side of Manhattan on West 84th Street, and I would be shaving and I would be listening to NPR, and I would hear Baxter Black on Mondays. He had this regular NPR little story. He'd tell a story and recite a poem, and I became and I looked forward to it every week. And then I came here and I met him, and I told him the story of how I'd listened to you on Monday morning when I was shaving, and of course, he took that shaving bit and he was like, wow, it was like, there I was with you doing your ablutions. But again, it also, it resonated with me then. I actually spent 2 summers in Boise, Idaho when I was in graduate school working at the Idaho Shakespeare Festival, which also really lit my passion for the landscape of the West. At that time, Boise's still not that big a town, but it was easy to get out. I was only 240 miles from Elko when I was there, and knew of Elko and Winnemucca and things that were going on there. But I kind of wound up where I belonged in terms of the landscape. I fell in love with the West when I lived in Idaho. I spent 3 years in southeastern Utah before coming to Elko, and then now I've lived in Elko longer than anywhere else I've lived in my entire life, and so it really is home. And again, I'm kind of thinking this is where I belong.
Yeah, this whole theme. And how it came about. And again, this is the culmination of 39 years of. I've been thinking about this myself. They're really love letters to the landscape and to the people who've come and gone and will continue. And it sounds like from sitting here with both of you, Cyd representing the origin and the history and certainly the future. John, with you coming in midstream and representing the future on the board. It sounds like we're pretty secure. It's going to stay. That's what everybody's always asking, right?
That is the commitment. And as anyone might imagine and would not be surprised, it's difficult to keep an arts organization moving forward. So we have some exciting strategies that are going to be unveiled later in the week here for the future, that I think are going to do a lot, not only for the gathering, which is what people see, but also for the work of the Folklife Center that people don't see, which is about curating and preserving artifacts and stories. And then I think that actually it's going to help Elko with economic development as well, and with some of the things we're planning for the future. It's going to be a big lift, and when you begin to hear about it. But I'm confident in this community. I'm confident in the individuals in business and industry who already recognize the value of the Western Folklife Center to our region, to our immediate region, but also to the rural West. I sit on the board of the American Folklife Center, which is at the Library of Congress, and I think I'm considered one of the luckier members of that board, because I live in a community where, such an important national cultural treasure is located. And, the American Folklife Center is keenly aware of the work of the Western Folklife Center. We're very fortunate with Congressman Amadei for his support of the Western Folklife Center as well. He's a big supporter of the American Folklife Center, and the Western Folklife Center realizes the importance of this work to the future of our community, our region, our state, and the nation as well. It's very important for the nation to have the treasure that we are stewarding here in Elko.
John Patrick Rice from the Western Folklife Center Board of Trustees, and with Cyd McMullen, who is also serving on the National Advisory Council. And I want to address in the program, which is out, by the way, the keynote speaker is Jeff Mundell, and he has written, obviously, he's going to be speaking, giving the keynote address, which does sort of set the tone for the on the boots work, boots on the ground work that the group is doing year round. The keynote address is Thursday, February 1st, 9:30 to 10:30, in the Elko Convention Center's auditorium. I'll just read this last paragraph. I don't think it's not a spoiler. He's going to be speaking about agriculture in unexpected places. Jeff Mundell writes, "I see a fusion of potential, a fusion of cowboy culture putting large herds of cattle back on the land, living with the herd in full pastoral fashion, a fusion of teams of biologists collecting data on plant species richness and spacing, doing bird counts and soil samples and any other data collection needed to measure ecological health. This is a horseback endeavor. We can decide how we want this to look. We can edit our archetype." And Cyd's nodding, and I was hoping you might talk about that because you also bring, Cyd, this unique perspective of coming from your ranching legacy, however many generations, to being an academic now, and to being someone who understands that this industry is struggling.
It is, and yet it probably has more promise in many ways than it ever has before, but it's always being challenged by people who don't understand ranching very well, who value wild horses over cattle, who are worried about the ecosystems that they think cattle always disrupt. Where agriculture has challenges, political, weather, climatic, economic. Cattle prices rise and fall. But through it all, and this is something that I think I learned from writing my book about the Ellison Ranching Company, is that there's a great determination to stick it out and stay. And I think that represents something that Elko represents as well to me, the number of people who have created a community it is a small community, but has a marvelous infrastructure for arts and culture, that supports arts and culture, that is small enough to have people in it who know each other and who care, but also is large enough to have some of the things like museums and a convention center and other things that are really fairly unique among smaller towns in Nevada and in the larger West. And so Elko has been able to persevere in other things. And we moved the railroad tracks. We were one of the first communities to achieve that. We started the community college system in the state of Nevada. We are the first, Las Vegas and Reno owe us something because some of the first casino acts started in Elko, were brought to Elko by Newt Crumley at the Commercial and the Stockmans. And so we have an entrepreneurial spirit in Elko County and in this corner of Nevada that I think it will carry us through.
I was trying to find it in my email. One of the board members shared a poem by Waddy Mitchell, which talks about just that ability to keep going. I can't remember. Waddy said it. I'm not even going to try to do it because he did it wonderfully. But Cyd's right. There are a bunch of firsts that have happened in Elko, Nevada. And even in my nearly 30 years here, I've experienced ups and downs and have always seen and witnessed all kinds of perseverance. And so that's why we're here. The reason we're here is because we keep doing it.
I was going to say that's another great theme for 40 years and beyond. The National Cowboy Poetry Gathering 39th is underway this week through Saturday, full of surprises, full of artists and guests and delicious food and music and poetry, and everything that you love, and maybe a few things that you've never thought of before, presented by some brand new people, some young people, inspiring all the way around. Also, I believe it's in the program book because I was thumbing through. This is a great program book. There's also an app for it. So if you're conscientious about paper, you can find it on your mobile device. But the Pioneer Hotel itself, starting out as a tent along the Humboldt River. So I get to go back a little more than you even, Cyd, in recounting some of our history. We just do these things, and ranching, mining, railroading, putting up bars and churches. We're still here, right?
Yep.
We are.
Yeah.
One of the things that Cyd mentioned too about, the ranching industry represents 10% of the economy of the state of Nevada, and that is significant. If we took away 10% of our economy, we'd be in deep trouble. You can weigh the proportions, but when it gets down to it, it is a very important part of what we do in our state, and it's an important part of our economic health.
Well, and if you think of the number of people who are in mining who come from an agricultural background, I mean, we have lots and lots of people who are who may have grown up on ranches or in rodeo or in some form of Western culture, and who are now working in the mines, but on their weekends, they go back to those roots.
Well, the incoming interim president of Great Basin College is a great example. A woman with a PhD and who built an amazing health science program, Amber Donnelly, and on the weekends she's ranching.
That's wonderful. I didn't know that about Amber.
She
Wow.
came from a ranching family in Lamoille,
Oh.
Blackstocks.
Oh, wonderful. Oh, Amber, I've probably known you since you were a little girl, and I didn't even know that. So that's fantastic. And that, again, brings us full circle, and that's really what we do. We sit in circles, we share stories, we come full circle. Life is a circle. We bring our kids to these events. They grow up, and they stay involved in these events, right, John, which is pretty rewarding in itself. So, Cyd, did I ask you everything that you were maybe anticipating or just wanted to add to today's program? We always run out of time.
Well, I just am happy that we are back. I mean, let me be honest, I am not very technologically apt. And so having the gathering online, although we couldn't help it during the COVID pandemic, it feels so good to be back in person and right where we belong and live and not virtual. And I love the fact that we can still reach out to those people who can't be here, but it's great to be back in person, I think.
Oh, Cyd McMullen, thank you so much. And it's wonderful to see Cyd McMullen sitting side by side with John Patrick Rice, and again, the intersections of life, and both of you and all your contributions to our community and through Great Basin College and beyond. So thank you. Yes.
Thank you.
Dr. Cyd McMullen, Dr. John Patrick Rice. Did I get to all the topics you were hoping to?
You bet.
All right.
Yep.
We're closing out today's show with just a reminder, everything we're talking about and much, much more that we could not possibly include is at the National Cowboy Poetry Gathering. Please don't let this opportunity escape and head over to the Folk Life Center headquarters, the Pioneer Hotel, downtown Elko at 5th and Railroad Streets, or head out to the Elko Convention Center. You're going to find this going on all over town. So enjoy a great week. Thank you so much for listening to Elko Live here on KELK.